They restart it? Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Azure Podcast. I'm here joined by my fellow co-hosts. This is Evan. We've got Kale here, Cynthia, Sajit, and Kendall, and then our very special guest, Girish. And the reason we have Girish Bablani here today is because this is our 400th episode. 8+ years. Yeah, I mean, milestone for us. I mean, whoever thought, all those years ago that people would want to listen to us for 8 years. My wife still laughs every time I tell her that we've been doing this for 8 years and 400 episodes. But like I mentioned, we've got, because this is such a special episode, reached out to Girish Bablani. Girish runs Azure Core, which is sort of the underpinnings of the broader Azure stack. And Girish, if you could introduce yourself and what you do for Microsoft.
Sounds good. First of all, congratulations on the 400th episode.
Thank you.
Exciting stuff. So I manage the Azure Core organization. So I'm the corporate vice president for Azure Core, which is three kind of big businesses, if you would, which is the compute, storage, and the networking business. And I've been at Microsoft almost 30 years.
Wow.
I think I'm going to hit my 30th anniversary in January.
That's the big crystal, right? Like, that's the really big one at that point.
It is, yeah. I had to get a crane.
Exactly. I think I've known you for a number of years now, but I first met you when you came over to what was Azure Compute at the time, which is a subset, right, of what you own these days. But before that, I believe you were with Azure Active Directory. Back in those days, whatever possessed you to leave Azure AD and come over to this thing called Azure Compute, and then ultimately, what became Azure Core?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was, how should I say? Of course, I took the job, but it was not something I was actually looking to do. So I was very happy with Azure Active Directory when Jason Zander, who used to actually be the director of development for all of kind of Azure properties, mm-hmm. So I reported up to him. The compute and other engineering directors also reported up to him. So he asked me because there was, the previous leader of compute had left, and so he said, "Hey, I think it'll be great that if you can kind of join this team and kind of bring the services experience that you have from Bing and Active Directory and other places to kind of Azure." So, I was kind of reluctant to take the job because I thought it's more like a fix-up job. And secondly, I was kind of a little nervous about taking the job because I actually never worked in systems. So my background is mostly applications and kind of, building stuff on top. And, I remember the very first 6 to 9 months, everything was just like, what firmware, what exactly is that? And you want me to talk about servers to Dell? I have no idea what the hell you guys are talking about. But anyway, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, I guess. So here I am.
Absolutely. No, yeah, thank you. I'm glad to see you join the team. I mean, it's certainly grown tremendously.
Yeah, one of the things I was wanted to get your thoughts on, Girish, was like, you've been at Azure and Microsoft for a long time, and you've seen this grow from something really small into something that's huge, scale now today. Looking forward, and like, 5-10 years from now, I know this is hard to predict the future, but there's a lot of high-level services like AI and quantum and all kinds of different things that are built on top of the core services you're talking about with compute, storage, and networking. Like, what do you see as the evolution there? What excites you about the future of Azure?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think 5-7 years out, I think we'll see some really kind of interesting innovations, both kind of at the bottom of the infrastructure as well as kind of how people perceive kind of Azure. So from the user and developer and IT experience, I fully expect us to do much more no-code, serverless, and policy-based stuff. So the IT guys are going to actually express, rather than their controls being, how the hell do I tweak the port on and off, more about, well, let's have like a no egress policy or selected egress policy. So you get to kind of express your intent in much more abstract terms, and that's going to become kind of much more prevalent. From the developer side, I expect a much bigger move to kind of serverless, as well as kind of just hiding the concepts of things like VMs or kind of containers becoming, that's how they actually get run, but the developer doesn't have to really think about it. They just have to think about their kind of business logic. So kind of raising that level of abstraction. And I expect a lot more workloads that are kind of AI and kind of training oriented. It's kind of just fascinating to kind of see the kind of amount of work that we're doing in that space, and the amount of compute and other resources that it just takes up, like training runs for autonomous driving. You're talking about thousands of GPUs, or modeling kind of natural language. We have actually 5 colos of GPUs that are trying to do kind of AI general training. So so all of that stuff is going to become kind of much more prevalent. As you can imagine, from the consumer and other perspectives, we're going to get a lot of AI-based stuff kind of showing up in your life, and all of that is going to get powered through some of the work that kind of goes in here. And then kind of just looking at below kind of the surface, kind of what are some of the things that that might happen is we're going to be burning a lot of energy with all the machines and everything that we're going to be running. So how to make them more efficient? You might have seen we have a pilot going on with liquid cooling. There was like an article in some kind of news magazines around that, which is, well, instead of using air-cooled blowing kind of air, we actually can immerse kind of the motherboards and other things kind of in kind of fancy liquid, which takes the heat away. And of course, it's a non-conducting liquid, so it kind of acts like air, except it's much better at kind of taking kind of heat away. So lots of kind of there's kind of we actually have an AI-based kind of power management scheme today, kind of in for Azure. So it looks at well, what to do if a UPS fails or if we lose power, and it kind of automatically decides how to decrease power to certain things and increase power to other things. So the next generation of that will basically also make placement and some of these kind of efficiencies of which things to kind of put together, which ones not to get kind of minimum amount of power. Robotics in the DCs, whereby repair of machines and other things is done by robots as opposed to kind of humans as we do today, and kind of a lot of the stuff that we do in our DCs gets kind of laid out automatically. So today we have people kind of working on spreadsheets and other ways by which they kind of go like, oh, I'm going to put an exchange rack here or some other thing here, and 5 years from now, I fully expect everything to be kind of agnostic, whether Exchange runs on rack 1 or 5 is again designed by the kind of AI systems that are running that at the DC rather than kind of humans. So it's going to be really kind of interesting. And of course, the scale. I think just like the law of exponents is just crazy, right? If we are even growing by like 50 or 70% every year, compounded for 5 years, it becomes a huge number.
So really following up to your last comment and the fact that there are so many different enterprises and companies that are running their software, their application on our infrastructure, what is the magic sauce in Azure's capability to scale, and how do you see that continue to grow, given that you own like a lot of the components that needs to support the first layer of scaling like everything else?
Yeah, I think the magic sauce is probably kind of hard work and automation. I think I think I like to kind of say that the infrastructure should be run by code, not by people. So people write code, and code runs the infra. I think that's kind of like the simplest way to describe this stuff. like an interesting example is kind of going back to kind of Azure Compute when I kind of joined. We kind of I walked into kind of Igal's room, who's kind of one of our PMs, and on his board he had like this kind of scribbling of these kind of fancy names, and I said like, what is that? And he's like, oh, that's the clusters. That's kind of the kind of Azure clusters that we have, and I have a list here of these, and we have a bunch of contractors, and we go through and mark them off when we have deployed stuff onto them, right? So that was our deployment system. It was kind of his whiteboard, and of course you can imagine kind of how error prone and all kinds of kind of interesting things. So we actually end up building a deployment system that would actually automatically deploy to not only those whatever handful of clusters we used to have, but to regions and to kind of air gap clouds and all that stuff, and do it kind of automated. And today we probably update the infrastructure like 30 times a day, and it kind of goes worldwide. It follows safe deployment practices to make sure we don't propagate a change too quickly, a bad change too quickly across the stuff. So that's just one example of automation, right? That kind of increases kind of scale, and I think we have to kind of do that across the board in terms of diagnostics, in terms of kind of going like, well, instead of figuring out that a disk is bad, can our code and our AI actually say, on server X, the disk is going to go bad in 7 days. Let's move all the VMs and workloads or whatever is running on that server onto a more healthy server without kind of human intervention. So at scale, the only way to work is through automation, and good automation, right? Like you want it to do exactly the right thing, and not and kind of minimizing that error budget. And that's basically the core philosophy of kind of how to scale this infrastructure.
So hi, nice to meet you, and thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it, and it's awesome anytime we get the opportunity to interact with someone who helps make what we do every day with customers possible. And so as I think about that in my role, we obviously are constantly building out new levels of abstraction, as you mentioned, on top of these core services that you run. So I'm curious, from your perspective, like, where does your responsibility fall in helping power what's created within Azure, right? Like, what does that look like for you and your team as we are building more and more on top of what you provide and support?
Yeah, I think the core goal is to just make sure, no pun intended, the goal really is to kind of support kind of customers on top, right? And the customers are folks like you who are actually building the next layer of abstraction to make it easier for kind of others, ISVs, who are kind of building new SaaS applications on top of the infrastructure, and then kind of the IT folks who end up having to kind of manage this on behalf of the various enterprises. So I think the simplest thing is just being customer focused and making sure that the people who are using the infrastructure are successful in whatever they're trying to do. And what the value that we provide is, of course, kind of running the infrastructure and the kind of scaling the infrastructure, but also kind of inventing a few new paradigms that make the job of folks kind of on top kind of easier. Like policy is a kind of a good example by which we can make it easier for the IT folks to kind of express their intent, or by kind of making it easier to build serverless offerings on top of containers. It makes it a lot easier for folks like you and other developers to just take advantage of the infrastructure. So that's how I think about it. It's all innovation in the service of the next set of layers.
And Girish, thanks again for coming on. I have a question about, I can imagine running all of Azure Core. What's your daily life like? I mean, like, is it mostly like, do you fight a lot of fires, for example, or do you have do you get time to also plan things for those next 10 years, like you talked about? What's like, you know, I know it's a loaded question, but like, what's your general day like? I mean, I can't imagine. I'm sure our listeners would
Sure.
love to know that.
Sure. I just jump from podcast to podcast all day. No, I'm kidding. I think it's a mix of all of those things. I spend maybe 20-25% of kind of time on say the next 3 months, which is kind of, you know, what are we doing in terms of looking at all our learnings from this massive scale of things that we're learning. Are the teams kind of working towards that? There's a lot of kind of maybe 30% of the time is just working with people, lots of peers, directs, etc. Just kind of building the connection and kind of absorbing information so that I have context by which I can kind of connect folks and go, hey, did you talk to person X here who's doing, which is related to what you're doing, and make sure you kind of have the synergies. It's kind of interesting that how many kind of you know, accidental kind of innovations or you can kind of come up with by just connecting people, and that kind of realized that instead of that, me seeing that as kind of like a tax, oh, I have to connect with this, I kind of see it as an asset because forming those connections actually makes kind of the team and the broader Azure team kind of stronger. So about 30% there. And then I would say about 20% on kind of catching up on what the hell is happening outside because we cannot be just kind of focused on kind of internals. And the remaining is kind of a mix of just working on the future, talking to customers, etc. So suffice to say, most of the day is in kind of meetings, and maybe a couple of hours of quiet time where I actually get to do some thinking or you know, write comments and actually do real work.
And this might be an unfair question, probably like asking who's your favorite child, but you know, which do you prefer, networking, compute, or storage? If you were to pick one of them from all the various things you had to do in the day, which would you pick?
Networking.
Yeah.
Good answer, Girish. Good answer. That so warms my heart at being a networking guy myself. It's so sort of as a wrap up question here, and thanks again for coming on. Like, you talked about thinking about the future and some quiet time. I didn't hear anything about writing code. When's the last time you got a chance to actually write some code, either for fun or, you know, for something you checked in somewhere? Like, how long is that? You know, when's the last time you got that chance?
So for kind of doing kind of hobby code, I kind of, as it turns out, one of my kids was actually kind of studying computer science, so
Nice.
kind of working on his assignments. No, I'm kidding.
He wishes.
Just playing around with kind of that stuff, and that's fairly frequent. The last time I wrote production code is quite a while back, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where I was we had a bunch of kind of dumps or kind of crashes that happen on the various hosts that we kind of run, and I don't remember exactly what we were trying to find out. I think we're trying to kind of isolate which you know, some kind of root cause, and this was the time when the team didn't really understand kind of machine learning. It was very nascent. So I wrote a classifier that took the various kind of dumps that, oh, now I remember, it's the blue screens. And the blue screen, you know, have some kind of random text, not random, but actual real text and other stuff. So I wrote a kind of image classifier that that would kind of take the dumps and classify them into 3 or 4 categories. So instead of actually, I think we had a developer who would go through the dumps and kind of go like, oh, this is X, this is Y, Z. I kind of wrote a classifier that could just do that kind of automatically.
I have used that code, Girish. I have actually used that feature at various points. So no, this is great. I'm glad, maybe you'll get a chance to write some more code somewhere. To my broader co-hosts, it's been fun. I've had a blast doing this. I can't wait to do the next 400 shows. And Girish, if you're still around, we'll, at that point, we'll have you back to talk about the 800th show. Yeah. Any last comments for the audience, Girish, or any of my other co-hosts?
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. This was really fun experience. So
this is way more fun than the average call that you and I are in together.
It's true.
Way more fun.
That's absolutely true.
Good way to end. Great. Thanks,
Thank
folks.
you.
We will be back next week.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.